Hi, Richard.
Hi, Fran.
Right. So, continuing with our series of very interesting conversations, today we have one that I think actually it need to be defined, or not to be defined, but actually clarified, perhaps, and which is operational efficiency. Mostly
Yeah.
because what it is, because there are many interpretations, if you may. And then is a reality of each factory or each company that is have a service or a fleet or heavy in assets, etc. And so what it looks like in real terms. I mean, in the floor for the people doing the job or in the field if they are not really in a physical place located.
Yeah, we like to call that from the top floor to the shop floor.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah. So, what does operational inefficiency look like, kind of in real terms, is
right.
what you're asking? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, from the outside looking in, it basically looks like work being done multiple times.
Well, yeah,
The same work being done, redundant work being done. Approvals, and it also looks like delays. It looks like frustrations. It looks like questioning purpose, right?
yeah,
Approvals, waiting days in someone's inbox, walking across a facility just to check a meter, uh, you know, emails chasing updates or spreadsheets that don't match, or it's basically an invisible tax that
right.
you're paying inside your business every day. There's limitless examples of an operational inefficiency. The ones at the top floor are more around information and decision consequence feedback loops
Yeah,
and how long it takes to find out, to either execute a strategy or to get feedback on a strategy so that
yeah,
they can, adjust things, that kind of stuff. That gets heavily impacted by operational inefficiencies, especially, in data, reporting turnaround times, periodicity, all that kind of stuff. But depending on the type of business down on the shop floor, it's moving data from one place to another. It's workflows that are uncertain or undocumented,
yeah.
things bouncing from desk to desk, that kind of stuff. It's really hard to name some specific examples unless we're talking about a particular business. But, you know, um, there are people who even hire efficiency experts to come in and look at everything, and they'll basically, take apart your whole business. I don't suggest we do that for anybody, but give them the tools to make sure that the biggest inefficiencies, there's a solution there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like sometimes it is so embedded into the daily routine that people doesn't realize that they are the lack of it. You mentioned something in terms of data transfer from different places,
Mm.
or people in the floor that actually they don't log the things that they need to log at a time, and they wait a period of time until they do it when they back to their desk or the stations. and and what happened in that period actually is timestamps are missing or that kind of things actually later when you're
Yeah.
coming back to those
The best way to smell it out, the
right.
best way, because inefficiencies across a business have a particular smell, and it
Right.
comes from morale.
All right.
You will find people, the morale of the business is suffering when the systems and the processes are not supporting them. And that's a key indicator. It's not about, timing things, right?
Right.
I would suggest that, when you go into a business, you basically are drawing a baseline. How is it that you do it now? And let's see how good it is in 90 days or
Yeah.
180 days, that kind of stuff. But for business leaders to understand, well, are we operationally inefficient?
Yeah.
Ask your staff, test your morale level,
Right.
right? Because
Interesting.
it's very rarely that people, get up in the morning and decide, I want to be unhappy and ineffective, you know? Hope springs eternal every day. People go into the office. It's those inefficiencies that tend to wear people down. It
Right.
exhausts people. Yeah.
So and in that experience what should be the hidden cost then for a business that didn't when they notice it's too late that are those costs that it's too late now, or oh, we have a problem.
Well, the hidden cost of operational inefficiency is pretty simple. It's opportunity cost.
Right.
Any time spent fixing avoidable issues is time not spent improving the business.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I also, I mentioned the human cost, people burning out because systems don't support them. The real killer is process drag that prevents scaling, right? Uh, Especially everybody wants their businesses to grow, to scale up,
Yeah.
or to become more efficient so that the bottom line at least is scaling, right?
Right.
Um, but opportunity costs. I mean, when you think about how hard people work to generate $1 of profit, right?
Yeah.
You have to look at it that way. How hard did we work to get to even just $1 in profit?
Yeah.
And if inefficiencies are costing you those dollars, it can be very, painful. It's a total blatant opportunity cost.
Right. Right.
Aside from the morale, it's going to have a morale impact. Whether you care more about improving the business or improving the morale, and I believe you need both to have a successful business, right? It'll be around opportunity cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting because for a maintenance manager or director or COO, all this about efficiencies, but that morale perhaps is a blind spot that they have, because actually they assume that it will be human resources or other part of or the teams in terms in the organization that will take care of that. But actually, uh, you mentioned earlier also that morale, actually that is quite surprising, isn't it? Because actually that you mentioned, actually
Yeah.
nobody wants to get up in the morning and be unhappy. But
No, nobody does. But look, good people hate bad systems.
right, right.
When your team is, constantly fights broken processes, they
Yeah,
disengage or they leave. They're not going to stick around for too long and they're not going to remain engaged. Yeah. The
yeah,
ones who stay end up firefighting instead of delivering value. Fixing inefficiency isn't just about performance, it's
yeah,
also about culture.
yeah, right. Um, and how yeah, we
A
mentioned it
lot of
briefly,
companies
but
normalize it. A
probably
lot,
sorry.
sorry, I just wanted to continue on that point. A lot of organizations end up normalizing inefficiency
Yeah,
because they're used to it. If systems are fragmented or hard to change, teams just build workarounds. People will try to adapt as much as they can. They won't perceive that as a good spend of their time, right? Patch and cope mindset, becomes the norm.
yeah,
Yeah. Until something breaks or someone finally says there has to be a better way, right? Then they get into patch it up and cope with it
yeah.
kind of mindset, and that's not what people wake up wanting to experience every day.
So I actually it's quite fascinating because we started thinking about inefficiencies as a operational cost, but actually all is down to people again. So how and I just to try to rescue these two things that you mentioned, I think that they have a lot of value. One is actually nobody wants to get up and be unhappy. The second is actually people love what they do and try to, particularly manufacturing, so they try to go and do the best, and they
Yeah.
had to adapt to those systems or broken processes and start to
Yeah.
patch them. And that is a kind of a domino effect. So that start to create inefficiencies and frictions that actually doesn't produce or doesn't get
Well,
the
we see it in software, don't we, Fran?
right.
That if your interface is ugly, users end up really disliking using the software, and you don't get that force multiplier of the users getting the most out of the software on
Yeah,
behalf of the business, right? So, that's kind of a bit of a silent protest. They might have no choice about doing the data entry or using the
right.
system, but if they enjoy the experience, then you end up getting far more benefit than you forecasted operationally in
Right,
terms of
right.
operational efficiency, right? You start to also get improved morale. And when people are fulfilled, they wake up wanting to have a good day and
Yeah.
wanting to do a good job, and they're able to actually do that, you end up getting a hell of a lot more out of them. Yeah.
Right. Right.
And,
Right.
so I think I know we were talking more about operational inefficiency. What are the costs of that? What
Yeah.
does that look like? Well, it really depends, but it's like death by a thousand cuts when there's a lot of inefficiencies in a business,
Yeah.
right? It's not one big, gash across your chest. It's a whole bunch of little cuts that eat
Yeah.
at everybody every day once you get into the patch and coat mindset. And it's very easy to see when you get in and you're, doing an implementation and you start training the users,
Yeah.
right? An interesting thing about that too, very often I've come across it in the last 30 years. You would think that user adoption of a new system and stuff like that would, that you would meet with resistance more often than not.
Yeah.
You're changing the way we do stuff. It's not actually been my experience. Very often they're relieved. They're relieved to have a workflow that's actually tracking them doing a good
Right.
job, because it'll report back efficiencies in as much
Right.
as it'll identify inefficiencies. And then their performance isn't entirely subjectively judged. A lot of it can be objectively observed, right?
Right.
When they've done things right, in the right way, at the right time, done the right thing, and the right kind of systems will show that. So once again, even great, a software implementation is about solving those inefficiencies
Right.
and improving that morale. I find the morale impact just as important as the data impact when it comes
Right.
to implementing software in a company. So it might be a surprising point of view, but I think that morale issue is one that a lot of companies overlook when they, adopt systems,
Yeah.
right? And it's one that I like to focus on when I'm
And
in with a new customer.
right.
Yeah.
And how Trinity can help that? Because actually, I think that the timeline, sorry, the observation is brilliant, because actually,
Well,
and all based on experience. So I think that you build Trinity around that. So how Trinity eliminate this inefficiency? I think that you mentioned already a few of them, but actually,
it just
specifically down to the software.
yeah, when it came to the mindset,
Right.
and just building something, my first priority was to give visibility first,
Mm.
right? Um, because you can't fix what you can't see,
Yeah.
right? Secondly, we connected strategy to operation
Right.
with immediate feedback loops, right? So you're not waiting for the reporting lag. And we're one of the only ones and one of the first ones that have actually done that, where, at the, strategic level with governance, risk, and compliance, right?
Yeah.
Directly linked into numerous risks like, threats and opportunities and metrics and strategic responses, feeding right into all of the operational
Right.
execution. So you're able to, execute a strategy and measure it against a baseline or a target
Right.
immediately, and able to, to fix things, right? And we help structure workflows that will automate some tasks, but where human involvement is necessary to make it as pleasant an experience as possible, right?
Yeah.
We want to also track compliance. We want to expose bottlenecks.
Yeah.
Trinity doesn't just document their processes, right? It makes the business perform better. And I
Yeah.
think that gives people an opportunity to, to adopt an improved morale.
And there is a metric or something specific that people will say, okay, fine, I have this problem now. I really have a problem. So, which is a moment of when the light bulb goes on
I
and say,
can,
oh, I
like
have
I
a,
said, just like the operational efficiencies, it can
yeah,
be different for any business, right?
right.
But there's always something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Either they get a report from HR that the employee survey was not good feedback, right?
yeah,
There's always an indicator, right? Sometimes it's a failed audit.
right.
Sometimes it's a delayed order that really upsets a customer. or realization that they've added more people to their team, but performance hasn't improved, right?
Right.
Eventually, that reporting is going to get back to you. That's when leadership looks up and realizes, that our environment, our systems, there's bottlenecks, and we need to do something about it.
Right.
There could be many, many triggers. You hope it's nothing that's compliance based, but
Yeah.
the worst cases that people will see is, if things have become muddled and inefficient and ineffective, and then you end up with, God forbid, a health and safety issue,
Right.
an accident or an incident that causes, real harm to the environment or to people or
Yeah.
something like that. That's where a lot of companies are like, you would hope that you could address that stuff before serious things happen.
Yeah.
But very often, the trigger is something unfortunate like that.
Yeah.
If it's just a delayed order, consider yourself
Yeah.
lucky, because it could be far worse than that. But you will also find customer feedback, hitting you. If it takes 90 days to execute a fulfillment order and they expect it in 30, you're going to hear about it. And there's
Yeah.
definitely inefficiencies in there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if we imagine that, but we Trinity actually doesn't disrupt what is the workflow of the company, works around this, and then is configured around what they already have, and then from there we have a second stage where we say, okay, now that we documented, it's all systemized or digitized, now is the opportunities to start to improve them. So I mean, actually, the workflows, the way that they operate, etc. So what in those prior implementation that you've done, what do you find in the first 30 days or so that actually they really start to highlight, oh, these are inefficiencies, this is what can be improved, and how these things start to evolve once the current status is documented and digitized?
Yeah. I like to call it, death by a thousand cuts, right? You're bleeding. You're,
Yeah.
you're bleeding in a bunch of different places. That's the best way to describe it, right?
Right.
You works, handovers, hunting for data. None of them big alone, none
Yeah.
of them on their own are big enough to sink the business or are the single culprit, but together they steal time,
Right.
right? Energy and momentum. And, time is something that none of us as individuals can get back. It's also something that a business can't get back.
Right.
Time is money, right? And if you're giving up time in that way, I mean, business is tough enough, competing, customers, pricing, all that other kind of stuff. That's tough enough,
Yeah.
right? You may have an awesome product, you may have great pricing, you may have, a wonderful team, but you start bleeding out with all these
Right.
various little micro delays. None of them big on their own, but together they steal time, energy, and momentum,
Right.
right? I like to think that, Trinity sitting on its own in an office, isn't going to do anything, right? But it can be used as a tool to reclaim a lot of that, right?
Right.
Reclaim time. So what I've seen within that first 30 days, especially when you're tracking workflows, you immediately identify where the bottlenecks are,
Right.
right?
Right.
We've talked previously about throughput,
Yeah.
right? That all, tracking a throughput, is basically what you try to do. Yeah. And then there's a whole bunch of utilities and bits and pieces that we've added to the system where manual work gets replaced by system work,
Right.
where reporting is automated, where calculations are done for you,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So you start to claw some of it back. Yeah. And you want to claw more back than the time doing business is costing you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's quite interesting because the concept that actually usually the large enterprise software, they tend to do that. They say, oh, we this is a best practices, so you have to change everything without knowing what they do. Well,
Best practices.
it's a kind of this is a standard for the industry. This is based on best practices for many, many years, which might be true, though not necessary for mid-market or small enterprises. And that's where the biggest challenge happen, because they have the same complexities, but actually they don't have the capacity to re-engineer all the whole processes and systems.
Yeah, it's
And
a very
systems, I don't
expensive endeavor.
mean software. I mean the way that they work as a
The
system
way they
work.
work, right?
Yeah,
Right. I don't think that's something that you want to disrupt. What they want to add, if somebody is shopping for a system,
right.
right? Yes, they want you to help them to adopt better practices. Let's put
Yeah,
it that way, not best practice. Help us adopt better practices,
right.
right? And there's all sorts of positive impacts, reductions of this, increases of that,
Yeah,
improved percentage of this, that kind of stuff. It's case by case basis when you get into a business.
yeah,
First off, requires a fairly important survey to find out their business model. How do they operate? What's
yeah,
important to them, right? And then you apply what fixes you can, and you avoid suggesting technical solutions where they're going to introduce even more inefficiencies. I mean, the cost of adopting some monolithic ERPs is far beyond there is no ROI. There just is no ROI. There
right,
could be cost avoidance to some degree. There could be compliance, right? Which, if you're in a penalized market, that could be more cost avoidance. But actually generating enough benefit that the system is paying for itself within a reasonable period of time.
right.
That's very difficult to promise to anybody, right? So if you basically are offering them, well, let's start the way you do stuff, and let the product help you figure out what would be better.
Yeah,
From a compliance perspective, if you don't have a system for tracking corporate gifting, well, that's
right.
just a good idea to have one, because everything's manual at once.
Yeah,
It's tough. It's difficult to not improve on spreadsheets and manual data management and stuff like that, right? So right away, you're going to see immediate improvements. Now, return on investment in terms of the system paying for itself, it's not just going to be in some percentages. It's also going to be in the staff morale. It's
right.
also going to be in, slowly but surely healing all of those little cuts,
Yeah,
all the little micro delays that haunt people. And that's the best you can do. If
right,
what a business is experiencing is actually people problems, or their product is a problem, or their price is a problem, I mean, software like Trinity isn't going to help you. However, if you're trying to gain cost efficiency so you can reduce your prices, then we can
yeah,
help you, right?
right,
So it really comes down to the business. It's why we have that 90-day program,
right.
right?
Yeah,
Is we go through a fairly, we don't go in and audit their business, but we do ask them enough questions to understand what's important to them and what their business model
right,
is.
right.
And we offer to be able to give visibility of certain things within that project timeframe, that first 90 days,
Yeah,
right? And it's then and only then that they can start to determine, where to achieve efficiencies.
yeah. Okay, fantastic. Well, I think that we established two interesting things. One is that um, inefficiencies probably are hidden in many different little things
Mm,
all around the system, not as a software, but actually as the organization, how it operates. What is the impact on people? Because nobody
mm,
wants to go to a place and not perform at their best. And
yeah,
when they find these challenges, they pretty much start to patch things, do workarounds, actually probably increase more the inefficiencies rather than to help. But actually, at the same time, that helps them in some way or how to operate. And the most interesting thing out of this is that protects people and highlights how well they work if they have a system. And now I'm talking software that actually represents their work and documents their work. So meaning that actually it's yeah, I've done this. This is what I did. It here's documented, and it start to highlight how the company can operate more efficiently, cost efficiently, and get a return on investment in a period of time that could be calculated pretty much.
that's correct. Yeah,
Well, that's quite an impressive session for today, and I'm happy we have all that in Trinity, and we can prove
it's
it.
a good conversation to have
Yeah,
because really, business. I don't want to wake up miserable
yeah,
and not adding value, right?
right.
So putting the product in place, I'm looking to drive
Yeah.
those benefits to a business. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I think that I think that we covered a lot today and a lot to digest too. So we'll meet up next week with another fascinating topic about what we do.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Fran.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Talk to you again. Bye bye.